In today's video, we are back with the Corolla XRS because it has a bit of a problem. It's bleeding, but unlike us, it can't fix itself. Now, if you don't know what I mean by that, allow me to show you. I have kept this under the car, and as you can see, this is engine oil. Now, this isn't enough of an oil leak to be a big emergency. However, it is never a good thing for oil to be leaking, no matter how much or how little it is. So we are going to address that in this video. Now, where is this oil leak? Well, I think it's actually two places, but it's mainly the oil pan. But I do think that the timing chain cover gasket is also leaking ever so slightly, but not enough to the point where I want to tear it apart and do it just yet. The oil pan, however, is leaking quite a bit, and that's mainly because I just did a bad job at using RTV on it. So the game plan is pretty simple. Lift the car up, put it on jack stands, take all the bolts out, remove the oil pan. So let's get to it. So the oil pan is out of the car, as you can see, it's right here. And now is the most important part of the process, which is cleaning off all this old RTV gasket maker. And it's really important because if we leave all this old stuff on here, then obviously when we put it all back together, it's gonna leak because it's not a flat surface. So in order to clean the surface, I'm gonna use a cloth, some acetone, and what's gonna do a lot of the heavy lifting here is a razor blade. Now I've already cleaned off the underside of the engine, so I know that cleaning off this RTV was kind of a pain. The vast majority had to be removed with the razor blade, and then I could get a little bit of it with the acetone, which was kind of surprising because acetone is some pretty nasty stuff. I've got to say, this RTV really impressed me. Or maybe impressed isn't actually how I want to say that. I think I worded it a bit more like this. This is so f***ing annoying. Anyway, that's not important. The important part is the underside of the engine is clean, but this is not. So let's go ahead and clean this up. So after a lot of scraping and using some acetone to dissolve it, the mating surface is now all nice and smooth. So it's at this part of the video where I'd like to strike up a conversation. See, you'd think at this point it's time to put some RTV down and reseal it and throw it back in the car, but instead what I'm gonna do is not use RTV and instead use a gasket. Now this particular gasket is from a company called Molly, or I'm not actually sure how you pronounce it, but anyway, there's the name in big letters, and this is the gasket that I'm gonna be using. And I bring this up because some of you might be thinking, oh, so what, you're gonna use a gasket, okay, fine. But These cars don't come with gaskets from the factory. They use RTV from the factory. So this gasket is not factory because these cars never came with one. So I want to start a conversation here as to which is better, or the preferred method, using a gasket, which is probably easier, or using RTV like they do from factory. And especially for an aftermarket oil pan like this. So feel free to let me know in the comment section below your experiences, opinions, etc. as to if you think using a gasket like this is good, or should I have stuck by using RTV instead. But since it's here, I'm going to use the gasket and we'll see how it holds up. Looks like it also comes with a washer for the drain plug, but since it's not a factory oil pan, there's no factory drain plug for that to go onto. So here is the gasket. And so the gasket just kind of goes on like that. That's the wrong way. Goes on like that. I am going to use some RTV, and I'm going to use RTV just to hold the gasket to the pan. The reason I'm going to do it is because I am not putting the studs back in. Instead, I'm using bolts to reattach the oil pan. I was never a huge fan of using the studs with the oil pan. That, and for whatever reason, if I put all the studs in the engine first and then put the oil pan up, for whatever reason, I can't get the oil pan to reattach for the life of me. I have to take, at the very least, the two studs closest to the transmission out in order for this oil pan to line up and go in and attach to the engine. I don't really know why that's the case, but I've had this problem on both of the Corollas, so I assume it's just a thing with these Corollas and these oil pans. I don't really know. But of course, not using the studs means that it's going to be more difficult to line up the gasket with the oil pan. So that's why I'm going to put a very thin layer of RTV down just to hold the gasket in place while I put the oil pan back. Here we go, I've put the gasket down and put some RTV under it, so now it's not moving around. And now it's time to put the oil pan back in the car. And the oil pan has been reinstalled. As you can see, here it is, and we're using these nice new bolts instead of the studs. Just a personal preference thing, I like using the bolts more than using the studs, but they both do the same job. As long as the oil pan stays on, then it's all good. But anyway, the oil pan is back on, and now it's time to fill the engine with new oil. Right, so while we're refilling the oil, I'm going to tell you guys something that I only just learned about recently, which I'm slightly embarrassed that it took me this long, but it's something I saw in a video I watched not too long ago, and I figured if some of you don't know about this, then this could be a nice teaching moment for all of us. Turns out over the years I've been refilling my oil incorrectly. If we pull the cap off here, I've always refilled my oil by using the big bottle and pouring it in like this, or pouring it in like this with the small bottles. And that's not how you do it. I thought I just had bad skill when it came to pouring oil, and so I would always rely on using a funnel, but actually, the way I was holding the bottle was incorrect. What I should have been doing was pouring in oil from the big bottle sideways, like this. And this allows me to hold the bottle much more horizontally, so that the oil will go nicely in and it won't spill. And as you can see, I've just poured in this whole 5-quart bottle and I have not spilled a single drop. In the case of the small bottles, we don't pour it in sideways, we turn it like this. And we pour it in like this. Actually, I got my point across really terribly there because I also spilled it. But if you're better than me at this, then you won't spill. Although, yeah, that got my point across quite terribly because I turned it this way and I still spilled it. That's just because I suck. But this is the right way of pouring this bottle of oil. So if you didn't know that before, well, now you do. And if you did know that, well, you can feel free to clown me in the comment section below for not knowing about this for the whole almost 6 years that I've been doing car stuff. In my defense, I am not a professional, so some of this kind of basic information doesn't always get to me, but I digress. Right, if we pull the dipstick and check, and it is ever so slightly overfilled, which is good because I did not pre-fill the oil filter, so some of this extra oil will go into the oil filter, and then it should be at the right level. Alright, now I've got a big sheet of paper here, and I'm just going to slide it under. And now that that's there, I'm going to leave it for a day and then come back and we'll see if any oil leaks out during that time. Alright, so it's been a couple days, so let's go ahead and check the paper. And yeah, I'd say that's pretty good. So the XRS's leaky oil pan has now been fixed. This is an issue I've been dealing with for a while now, but I haven't wanted to fix it yet since it wasn't time to change the oil and it wasn't really that bad. But it is an issue that has been bugging me for a while, so now it's taken care of and I don't have to think about it anymore. Also, I just realized I forgot to put the oil cap back on before I left, so that's great. Anyway, that's going to be it for today's video. Let me know in the comments what you think of using the gasket versus using RTV to seal the oil pan. I know there will be differences of opinion, so I'm interested to read all this. But that's it from me for now, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.